Hello, everybody. This is Gerald Celente, and we're honored again to be here with Judge Andrew Napolitano. And nobody in America, nobody anywhere in America says what Judge Andrew Napolitano says with the authority and the judicial background. And what we're going to be talking about today really has to do a lot with that authority, judicial background, and what we the people are being robbed of. Number one, our First Amendment rights. And the article you have is Twitter and the freedom of speech. And you begin with, quote, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the press. How dare you say that? That's disinformation.
Gerald, good morning, and it's always a pleasure to be with you. The First Amendment only restrains the government. Originally, it restrained Congress, but now it restrains all government. And theoretically, it doesn't restrain private entities. So if Twitter wants to ban Donald Trump or Gerald Celente or Andrew Napolitano because they don't like the content of our speech, as hurtful as it is, they can do it. They own the bulletin board. Unless Twitter is doing the government's bidding. Now, why do I say that? Because investigators for Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee have unearthed emails between Twitter executives and officials of the Department of Homeland Security, in which the Department of Homeland Security wants Twitter to do something about, are you ready for this? Because it's a new word. Malinformation. This is a government word. DIS-MIS-MAL-information. What is that? Whatever speech the government hates or fears, it wants to talk Twitter into suppressing. So if Twitter suppresses speech on its own private platforms as an agent of the government, then the First Amendment comes in. Then Twitter is governed by the First Amendment, because then Twitter is helping the government do indirectly what it can't do directly. This is called the state action doctrine, when a private entity replaces the state and does the state's bidding. And that is apparently what is happening. Now, these investigators on the Senate committee need to get more emails, but the emails that I saw were pretty clear. By the way, Gerald, have you seen this in the New York Times? Have you heard it on any of the mainstream media?
No.
Of course not.
Now, what did you say? Twitter is what from the government?
Twitter is contemplating doing the government's bidding. The emails that I saw showed Twitter executives and officials of the Biden Department of Homeland Security talking about getting together, at which they will discuss how Twitter can help the government with misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. So if you were to say on Twitter, that's not a vaccine, it's a concoction of chemicals intended to lessen the effect of COVID, but it's not a vaccine. It doesn't prevent you from getting it. The government would consider that mis, or malinformation, and the government would ask Twitter to take you off. When the government does that, then Twitter is doing the government's bidding, and they cannot kick you off because of the content of your speech, because the government can't punish you for the content of your speech. So Twitter getting in bed with the government will expose the government's anti-free speech attitude. Nothing new about that. And will, by making itself complicit in that, it will lose the ability to kick people off its private bulletin board.
Wow. So Twitter is doing the government's bidding.
Twitter executives and the DHS are meeting to figure out how Twitter should do the government's bidding. But what you said is true already. Twitter is a couple steps ahead of the government, and it's doing the government's bidding already.
This is terrible. And you go on to say here, this is you get these power hungry freaks. And you went on, so during the Civil War and World War One, President Abraham Lincoln and Woodrow Wilson incarcerated folks for their speech and argued that the First Amendment only restrained Congress, not the president. And again, you say that today, such an argument would be dismissed out of hand in any court. So you go on also to say, but the First Amendment only restrains the government, it does not restrain private persons, whom lawyers call non-governmental actors. But now you're saying that because they're in contact with them, the private organizations, with the government, and they're working hand in glove, they are in violation of the First Amendment.
Absolutely. So we know why the government wants to suppress speech it hates and fears, because the government fears people criticizing it and exposing it. But why would Twitter, why would any big tech want to go along with the government? Because big tech has statutory immunity from being sued. If I go on Twitter and defame somebody, that person can only sue me. They can't sue Twitter. And Twitter wants to keep that statutory immunity. That's why it's doing favors for the government, as horrible as these favors are, because it's punishing speech because of its content.
And